PlayStation 2. Being an adult now is owning the PlayStation 5 and not being able to play it.
First of all, happy to have you on, man.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. You know, I've always been a fan of New Bedford Guide and all the stuff that they do. And like I've told you, you know, I've seen a dramatic change since you've come aboard. So
I appreciate it.
I love the opportunity. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So why become a city councilor in New Bedford? First of all,
Oh, good question. Right off the bat. Well, I'll start by it starts with my upbringing. Really, my family was very involved when I was younger. You know, my uncle was involved in the school system. My grandfather was a big advocate for council on aging, and even my dad, volunteered a lot. He actually tried to run for office in the 90s when I was little. So seeing him doing it and seeing him want to be, someone who gives back to the community, that instilled it in me at an early age. It wasn't something that I really thought that I would ever do. But now with, little ones of my own and still, being in the city that I grew up in and love, I really felt that it was a right time in my life that I have time to give back. The other thing was I always look for, folks, especially in our local government, that, do I see myself represented there? And at that time, I really didn't. I saw, maybe little aspects of me, but I didn't see somebody who was fully representative of who I was. And if I knew if I felt that way, then there were some other folks that feel that way also. So that was just kind of like the catalyst, that it was something that I've wanted to do for a while, and the timing was right.
And so what is the process like running for city council, starting a campaign? That's the first time that was your first introduction to politics, correct?
First introduction, like actually, I've always, I've helped folks out, maybe done some canvassing or stuff like that, but never like being the guy, being the person that is seeking the office. So it's easy to start, right? To get it to say, hey, the biggest thing is saying, I'm ready to do this. I have the time, the energy, the effort to do it. Once you get that out of the way, the rest is a little bit of paperwork and just meeting as many people as possible. It's relatively simple. You go down to your city hall and you say, when it come election time, I'm looking to run for this office. You start meeting your neighbors and your hopefully future constituents up in the neighborhoods and introducing yourself and just basically telling them, I'm looking to run. People are very open to opening their door to you. A lot of come on in, and so people are always welcome to change, new faces. So people shouldn't be intimidated to think that, I can't do it, or if you think you can do it, then you can do it.
But so it's easy to sign the papers, but It's hard to actually win, right?
Well,
that's the tough part.
And the other thing too is it's what's your message? What's your message going to be? What are you trying to fix? What are you trying to bring to light? And it could be just as simple as, hey, I think I could do a better job, or not that this person is doing a bad job. I have new ideas. I have a new thought process, and you're not alone out there. You're not the only one that thinks that way.
So you said that you feel like you weren't really properly represented in the local government. Yeah. What were some issues that you feel like weren't being addressed that you feel like you can address better?
The biggest thing is, especially the part of the city that I represent, Ward 3, which is technically the real center of the city. It's all of 195 corridor, and then all the neighborhoods that kind of encompass that. But we don't have any parks. There's no public park in Ward 3.
Really, I didn't know that.
There's nothing. There's not a lot of restaurants. There's not a lot of entertainment. It's kind of like a pass-through ward. And I just felt that, I'd love to bring a little bit more attention to not only the ward, but, to the city in general. And I think being the center point of where people come in, off of 140, off of 195. That's your first impression, really, when you come into the city of New Bedford, in my opinion. So I want to make sure that my streets are clean. I want to make sure that, we're well lit, and that on the city council we have somebody that's always advocating for, that next level of, not just appearance, but representation. So I was just a common guy. I'm not all, a lot of people think, city councilor, you have to be in finance or a lawyer or a doctor or accountant, whatever it is.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a correction officer. I've been doing that for
okay.
So
we're in Dartmouth, or
so a lot of, that's one of the first questions, because you think CO or correction officer, it's like, oh, Bristol County, you know this guy, that?
Yeah.
I actually work for the state of Massachusetts. So I work for the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. I did my first 11 years in Walpole, Massachusetts, and then when the state closed that facility down recently, I transferred over to Bridgewater. So although our unions represent the officers at Bristol County, aside from that, there's not a whole heck of a lot of crossover. There's no with two different entities. So
you're commuting to Bridgewater every day?
So it takes me about 25 minutes, but I was commuting from here to Walpole.
Yeah, okay.
For the last nine, and it's basically going to Gillette Stadium every day, because sometimes when like a game would be playing, you'd be stuck at work and you can hear the game going on, So, but yeah, so I've been doing that for the last 12 years. And we were just at a point where I said, this is something I've wanted to do. I have the time to do it, and I want to represent like just the typical person from New Bedford with the typical job and just typical views, and just trying to do the best that I can in the moment.
How do you feel like being a CEO helped you run for office? Like, what kind of lessons have you learned in that career that you think can translate over to being a city councilor for New Bedford?
I definitely think communication is very big in the line of work that I do and my fellow officers do. We don't get weapons. We don't get, a baton, mace, any of that. But if any of those are involved, all heck is breaking loose inside. It's all you have. Your biggest asset that you have is your voice and your ability to communicate with people. If you're in a cell block and there's an average of 40 to 60 guys per unit, if they don't want you to go home that day, you don't go home that day. So you have to be able to talk to people, manage expectations, and be able to say no sometimes. The answer can't be yes all the time. But communication is probably the biggest thing. So I think that has helped me not only, become a city councilor, but, in my role as a city councilor.
And speaking on becoming a city councilor, I mean, you were on the tail end of a pretty vicious campaign. You were, I don't want to say canceled because you won, so you were kind of like unsuccessfully canceled almost. There was a protest. What was that whole situation like? I mean, welcome to the world of politics, right? You got people protesting with your name on signs.
Right. It's wild, right? And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. Or it's that everybody has the right to say how they feel or what they think is wrong. And, I'll never slight anybody or for that. It's being a city councilor, you come from different backgrounds, from different views. But if you truly have good intentions, regardless of your stance on any political, national, or local level, as long as you feel and can exhibit the ability to represent everybody, regardless, basically just being an overall good person, you'll succeed. You have the ability to represent everybody, despite coming from different backgrounds or different ideals. Because when you see something like that, it does put doubt in yourself a little bit. Am I a bad person? Am I? And it's just we don't agree. But so long as we can not agree and continue to work together for some sort of common ground, I think that's what's lacked, especially on like the national level. On the national level, it's either this way or that way. Well, and we totally forget about finding that common ground, what brings us together. You know, maybe it is a little bit of this, and maybe it is a little bit of that. But I'll say this: I was saddened that it came to that, because some of it did have some merit. Those folks felt, maybe that they were attacked or slighted in some way. But on the other end is, is this, what we've been seeing just more of a political attack, and then it was after the fact. I was a counselor-elect.
Was that during the campaign, or was that after the election?
It started 4 days before the end of the campaign.
I'll say this too. Like I read up on the article. I think it was the New Bedford Light wrote the whole article kind of. So it was like 6 memes, which we're canceling people for memes. That's kind of crazy. 3 of them, it was just like your political opinion, perfectly fine. The other 3 were something about transgender kind of issues. And then I saw that you were talking face to face with some transgender people in the community. I mean, what was that like? It seems like you kind of attacked it head on. Yeah, well, the whole issue.
This is what I'm talking about. Is still being able to come from different ideas or views, or however you want to describe it, but to still be able to put the hand out and still be able to be willing to work with people despite however you feel on a particular subject. But yeah, to me,
do you feel like it almost hurt your opponent's campaign by pulling that kind of strategic, dropping it 4 days before the election? Do you feel like people were kind of sick of the whole cancel culture, cancel people?
I would like to say, yeah, because if it was something so outrageous, maybe it would have been brought up sooner, earlier, or whatever. And I don't, I understand that words have meaning, and when you run for political office, especially local office, nobody says, well, make sure you do this and, delete all. That's not who I am. I'm telling you, okay, I saw something, whether, not that it was funny or anything like that. It was just something that it's very easy to click that share button.
Yeah.
When you're like, hey, that's right. Or, hey, this is wrong, or whatever. It's easy to click that button and think nothing of it when you're doing it. And like you had said, there was a handful of memes that they had gone back a few years, I think up to 5 years back. But I was getting attacked for not just that. There were other attacks that I was getting through email and message and stuff that, I have a blue line flag in front of my house,
which is
supporting our law enforcement. I'm in law enforcement. You can support, law enforcement and good officers and not support the bad ones, So yeah, it was just, it was different because I had never been in that type of.
Yeah. Did you second guess running for office kind of after this whole kind of cancellation attack came towards you, the whole cancel culture crowd? Were you like that first night where you saw this go public? What was it? The New Bedford Light article? Is that kind of what broke
I believe so. I think actually at first there was some murmurs on WBSM about it, the local radio station, about it. And to be honest with you, I don't even remember how I heard about it. Because you're in it. So you're not, you're the topic, All I kind of remember was just kind of like everything was a little slower that day. Everything was just, I was, a little numb, like, to what's happening. And, my main concern was, my family. How is this going to affect my son who's in the school system? How's this going to affect my, my wife and my, my neighborhood? Those were kind of like my first thoughts. And, the folks that were protesting, although they were protesting, they were rare, they were peaceful. They weren't, and even when they were at my inauguration, they spoke their piece, and I think that's when I had gone over to them and to speak with them and stuff, and they throughout that process they were still very respectful. So I think that was kind of they've had some respect for maybe not me, maybe the process, because I'm the subject of the issue at hand, but I wanted to show them that I'm here to represent you regardless of where we are on any of the issues. And that's just the person that I've always been, is regardless of your political views, your beliefs, or whatever, so long as we're good to each other, we can coexist, if you will,
Yeah. What kind of conversations were you having with those protesters?
Well, it was just basically letting them know that, I respect their beliefs. I respect their views. I respect their feelings. And then I'm here to work for them regardless. And, I'll never change who I am as a person. That's always who I've been, is to try to do the right thing. And especially as a city councilor now, it's incumbent on you to, represent the many. You can't. You try to represent on every issue, but knowing that you can't, so long as you operate with good intention, the betterment of the community, and keeping people's, thoughts, feelings at heart, I think you'll be very successful in pretty much anything you do, let alone being a city councilor.
Well, you were successful and you won, and now you are a city councilor. What are some things that you've learned now that you've become a city councilor of New Bedford?
Well, that's the other thing too, is, you get elected to office. There's no handbook. There's no here, this is how you become a city councilor. So you always should take a little bit of a listening role. Things are very procedural, it's not just 11 people in a room shouting at each other. There's an order in which things are done. So you have to learn that. And again, you can look it up online now. You can find anything online. But there's still no real, congratulations, you won an election. Here's your orientation. So always take a listening role first, see what's going on. And you take that into the community that you now represent. Take that listening role, start seeing what, some of the folks have either been seeing lacking in their local government, issues that they wish were corrected, and start advocating on their behalf. One of the biggest aspects of the city council is being fiscally responsible with, the purse strings, if you will. You're now in charge of disseminating millions of taxpayers' dollars, and you want to make sure those are going to the right areas. We're at a time now where, families have been asked to tighten up a little bit. And I think that our government can do the same. So that's the approach that I would like to bring. I know that I can't let my budget get out of control at my house. So I try to, you always have to have one strong suit. And I think, mine is the ability to communicate with folks and advocate for things that they want, and still being mindful of these things cost money. So let's see how we can make that. It's like a dance, really, I guess.
So, yeah, you're on the ground floor of New Bedford. What are some issues that you're hearing from New Bedford residents that they're very concerned about?
Yeah, well, very topical things. Obviously, we always hear, our streets, our parks need to be cleaner. our streets need to be paved, our sidewalks need to be redone. Those are all, topical issues. Then you start getting into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes of the stuff. Is my taxes are too high. I have maybe an issue that I've been trying to bring to light, whether it be we've been dealing with our growing homeless population in the city of New Bedford now. How can we manage that? What can we do? It's not that people don't want to help, but we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and not just moving people along. So that's kind of that's a big issue right now, is where are these folks going to go because of the rising rents? I know that this is more of a national thing, but
to localize it a little bit,
what can we do here?
I mean, we have the South Coast Rail coming in, and a lot of people who are renting are concerned that their rents are going to go up significantly. And it's already so expensive to live in the South Coast. What are you hearing from people? What are their concerns, and what do you think a solution is to this?
I think that's always been a concern that's been looming. And, I've been hearing about South Coast Rail almost my whole life. I remember being in middle school, and the train's coming.
Yeah. Me too, yeah.
So... but now the realization that the train is coming.
It is coming, yeah.
All the signs are up on 195 and on 140. They're covered with tarps.
I just saw it the other day. I was driving on Route 18 and saw the train.
So I saw, where was I the other day? It must have been the same day.
Yeah.
I think I was on Nash Road, and it had just passed by. So they're doing the test runs and all that stuff. So it is coming. But that is a concern, right? Are these folks from Boston going to come down here and get what is still affordable rents, more than affordable rents for folks that are living in Boston, but not so affordable here? I know that a few years ago I was looking at rental properties to purchase, and my real estate agent would tell me, hey, you're the first one to physically see this building. There's a little bit of interest in it. If you like it, we're going to have to put an offer in today. And I had to sign a waiver to go into the house because the front and back porches were such in shambles that they didn't want, if I got hurt on the property,
Wow.
They didn't want. And when I was done touring the property, we spoke to the other agent, and the agent was, yeah, well, if you like it, you got to put in an offer today. And it's like, okay, well, just so you know, I already have 5 sight unseen offers.
Oh, man. And a lot of them...
And meanwhile, I had to sign a waiver to enter the home. And these people are making offers without even seeing the house.
They're waiving inspection. They're just like, yeah.
So there is some concern there, and their concerns are valid.
Well, one thing that you hear a lot of people say is that companies are buying these residential houses, and that's just across the country. But are you seeing that in New Bedford? Are companies coming in and buying residential houses?
I mean, I don't see it as, it's not saying that it doesn't happen. It does happen, but I don't think it's to the scale that, they're saying that it is. I think it's a market. It's called a real estate market, right? So just like the stock market, there's going to be ups and downs and highs and lows. And right now we're in this kind of like bubble that I think a lot of people are just waiting to pop. So things.
I rent right now.
Yeah,
I'll be totally honest. I rent, paying just about $2,500 a month.
Yeah,
to rent an apartment, a 2-bed, 2-bath, and I'm 28 years old. I have a lot of friends my age. I don't know anyone. I know maybe 1 or 2 people that are a little bit older than me. I don't really know anyone my age that owns a house.
Yeah,
maybe there's the exception of like your family came into some wealth, or hey, congratulations, you did really, really, really well for yourself, and you can afford to buy a house in this market. But me, it just doesn't seem like it makes financial sense to buy a house in this market unless I want to live in a really, really lousy neighborhood. And that's the frustration I'm hearing with people my age is it's just so you're looking at $500,000 just to buy a dilapidated house that you probably have to sign a waiver to get into in a bad neighborhood, right?
Right.
So, where do we go from here? How is my generation, the 20-year-olds of today, how are we going to be able to afford to buy a house? And I know, you're city council, you're not the president of the United States. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, what wisdom can you give to my generation on how to attack this issue?
To be honest, it's definitely difficult. I have a 22-year-old daughter, and she reached. She was living in Taunton. She, growing up, so she's going out on her own. She was born and raised here in New Bedford, and but now that she's out on venturing on her own, she calls me a couple of weeks ago and says, "Hey, Dad, I'm looking to move. My lease is up." And she was living in one of the, I think it was a old Catholic school that they had converted into housing, as much like what you see happening here, old schools, old mills, turning into different use properties now. And I said, okay, well, what are you looking to get? And it's like, like a 2-bedroom. I'd like to stay on the second floor or nothing higher than that. But if I have to, I have to. I'm like, oh, what's your budget? She's like, oh, $2,200. And I was like, for what? So I think, in this market, I got a lot of friends in real estate. I know you do too. I don't know how you could buy in this market without having, like you said, a little bit of a nest egg that or your family was able to help you out, or you started saving when you were doing your paper route when you were, however old. I don't even know if kids do paper routes anymore. I know I did. But getting that initial down payment and still trying to live a somewhat average life is difficult. But the biggest thing is we live in a time now in the city of New Bedford that there isn't as many major jobs like they used to. This mill that we're in right now was hustling and bustling years and years ago, as well as all the other ones. Those families stayed and the mills left, and nothing ever really came to replace all those jobs. So obviously the better jobs, local jobs, that would be key, is incentivizing companies or manufacturing or these new, not so much clean energy, as you can see, we're getting into that on the waterfront, but getting some of these places, we were able, before I was on the council, they were able to put aside 99.6 acres alongside the golf course for new manufacturing industry. That was a few years ago. Nothing ever came of that as of yet. Being told that we're going to try to revitalize that again, but getting jobs here for real, New Bedford residents, that'll be a huge step in that.
But on that same note, I know there was an article released a few months ago, I believe, on the offshore wind jobs and how it was actually job hours or some weird kind of explanation.
Funky math.
Yeah, it really kind of confused me. So are you seeing New Bedford residents having offshore wind jobs, or was that kind of promised in a dishonest way?
So I think it was always presented as jobs. I don't think it was ever really presented as New Bedford jobs. And then we learned that it's job hours, hundreds of job hours.
And most of that, I believe, is spent on actually constructing the windmills. So those aren't permanent jobs.
The way that I look at what's happening in the city of New Bedford is we're not in the clean energy business, okay? New Bedford is going to be in the energy management business. And what I mean by that is to get these, regardless of how you feel on wind, I'm not a big wind guy. The windmills have been around for years. The Dutch have used them for hundreds of years. And if it was as sustainable as we said it would be, it wouldn't be a push now. We've already would have been pushing this. I'm more of a mix kind of guy, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'm more of a hybrid. I don't think we're ever going to get away from, fossil fuel. I don't think I'll be able to watch NASCAR, electric car style. I just can't. But when I say we're not in the clean energy business here in New Bedford, these companies are coming in, they're leasing our land, using our waterfront, doing what they're doing, setting it up, and then they don't really need to be here anymore. They need folks here for maintenance when things go wrong, or where they need parts. So I think the local jobs that we may see will be down the road when different companies now have to exist to either store, hold, or maintain a specific part, go out and physically fix the turbines and things like that. Those will be the jobs that we'll see. Yes, there's some local New Bedford folks that are doing those jobs, but the everyday New Bedford job, I think, is going to be more of a maintenance standpoint than a production standpoint.
Got it. Do you feel like there are enough people to hold the offshore wind accountable for, I know a big issue that we're hearing, I see all it's, and for full disclaimer, I don't know anything about offshore wind. Like when it comes to whether it hurts marine life, I'm not a marine biologist. All right.
No,
like,
neither am I.
You know what I mean? I went to New Bedford High School. I did my thing. I do video production, social media. I'm not a scientist. So I would love to have a scientist and a fisherman on this podcast at the same time, and have them have a nice civil conversation. So I would love to set that up if anyone's listening.
That'd be great.
I would love to have that conversation.
I'd love to watch that. I can tell you that.
I feel like that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
But one thing I am seeing or not seeing is the fishermen really represented in their fight against offshore wind. It feels like almost taboo to even speak about it in public. Like you're not allowed to talk about the offshore wind. And I see a lot of people upset that they feel like the offshore wind is donating to a lot of different news outlets. Therefore, those news outlets aren't going to write negative articles on them. And then they're also, obviously, I don't want to say in bed, but they're working with a lot of these universities. So those universities aren't going to put out studies against them as well. Do you agree with that, or what is your take on keeping the offshore wind in check?
So I'm not a subscriber to all conspiracy theory things, right? But to say that none of that isn't happening that's false too.
Yeah.
So I do think that some of that does happen.
And by some of that, what do you mean? Like
controlling the media, or
it's a lot harder to write a negative article if someone's writing you $100,000 check. That's just how the world works.
Absolutely,
man,
and that's what what you hear is, this person is a large donor to X, company X or whatever it is. They're not gonna smash that person. They might not. They'll help you by not. They'll post nothing or say nothing, or so to think that they're not gonna do that, I think is a little naive. Again, I'm not like, everybody's being mind controlled or any of that. No. It's not that at all. It's these folks have something that they're looking to push, and how do you do that with advertising, right? So if you have a message or a product that you're selling, you want good advertising. So however you're going to do it, word of mouth, buying up ad space or something like that. Nobody puts out bad ads unless you're attacking somebody. So you want to control the narrative, right? These larger companies, whether it's offshore wind, whether it's solar, whoever it is, you want to the product that I'm selling is good, it's clean, it's not hurting. But then you hear from folks that have been around, especially our fishing industry, who's put us on the map. Our richest seaport here, but yet I don't feel like that's stayed. I think it worked well with when we had our textiles here and our fishing. That's what really made New Bedford, one of the richest areas in the world.
Country, yeah.
But when half of that, when your left arm no longer works and you're only supported by your right arm now, they really worked a lot better together. So we never found, like I said earlier, we never found that what's that next thing to fill that void. But talking to folks down on the waterfront, they're seeing things that they've never saw before in 40 plus years of fishing. I spoke with a gentleman he's based out of Westport, but he fishes for conch, sea snails. And he's been fishing for sea snails for the last 42 years. And in the last 18 months, he's pulled up more dead sea snails than he has in all 40 years of fishing for this type of animal. So what's different? What's happening out there? I know you said you're not a marine biologist, you're not a scientist, you don't even play one on TV. Neither do I. But, when I was a kid and I had a goldfish, one of the first things that they said is don't tap on the glass, don't bang the glass, don't, you learn about in school about how our marine life uses echolocation and their own sonar and all this other stuff. How can we say that these things don't affect them? I don't think you can, truthfully. But who's checking them? Where is that accountability? And I think it's now falling on, because this is kind of new territory for us here, it's falling on our state and local delegation to make sure that this is not just right for the environment, but is it right for us? Is it right for New Bedford? Like I said, I'm not a fan of, and it was well before as people have belittled it, the one blade that broke, and yeah, well, that's the one blade that broke now. What happens when 5 more break, or what happens when we start to see, hey, this is bad out there. How are we gonna? What's the rollback gonna be? And what those jobs that I was hoping, that I just spoke about a little while ago, that I was hoping that we would have, those real New Bedford jobs. Do we get to that point that we ever see those jobs before we realize that we're doing something out there that we shouldn't be?
Yeah, I mean, every time that we post anything to do with the offshore wind, I mean, there's just a million comments, a million DMs of people upset. And I know that doesn't represent all of New Bedford. There are people who do believe in the offshore wind.
Absolutely.
But it would be dishonest of me to ignore all of those comments, just pretend that they don't exist.
Oh, absolutely.
So speaking for those people, the population of people in New Bedford that are against offshore wind, do you personally think that offshore wind affects marine life in a negative way? If
you're asking me, like, if we're hanging out and you're like, hey, Shawn, do you think that the offshore wind is affecting the marine life? Absolutely. I'm also not naive to the fact that, like, everybody, any mammal, animal that washes up on shore, people automatically default to offshore wind. Oh, it's offshore wind.
Yeah, animals still die, right?
Well, that's that, and people, they never. I feel like nobody ever really says that, and I say that all. I'm like, well, there's no animal funeral home, out in the water. The animal funeral home out in the water is a bigger animal eats it,
yeah.
or it decays to the fact that it never makes it ashore. The fact, like you had said, these animals become deceased out there. Was it offshore wind? Was it something else? Was it natural causes? They get sick just like we do. They have all different ailments just like we do. To subscribe to, like, every bit of sea life that washes ashore is because of offshore wind, I think that's false also. But to say that offshore wind isn't contributing, I think that's wrong too. My grandfather, he is hard of hearing, but right outside his bedroom is 2 transformers on the pole for electricity, and for years he's saying, I can hear them. They hurt me. They're hurting my head. I can hear it. And everybody in the family is like, "Fu, you're hearing it. You're not hearing anything. So my mother had called the power company just to appease my grandfather, and they ended up changing the transformers because they were emitting a frequency that he was hearing. So if he can hear that, there's nothing in my mind I'm not saying that they can't hear what's going on out there. The driving of the pylons into the floor of the seabed, the humming of whatever is the vibrations, so these things we know that this is happening, and to say that it doesn't affect them, it's false. I don't know how anybody truly believes that.
And what are the conversations like with the other city councilors and the other representatives of New Bedford?
Well, I think most of my colleagues that I've spoken to regarding it kind of feel similar. I haven't spoken to many on it. I think you're starting to see now a little bit of people are taking a second guess. A lot of times these companies will come in and they may sell the community or the general public like a bill of goods. Like, this is all good. This is great. This is your local, your federal and state government are all on board. And we just kind of say, oh, okay, we have our gripes about it. But we're not going to know. It's these things aren't fully true and tested here. We've tested them in labs and we've tested them overseas and stuff like that, but it's here. I don't care about overseas. I don't care about the lab research. I care about how is it going to affect here. Is it going to affect my number one fishing port? Is it going to affect travel? Is it going to limit us? I'm not a big guy on restrictions, but to say that there's going to be, hundreds of these things out there, they're not the most appealing thing to look at. I think that's one of the reasons why we were like, put them out there. Not everybody gets to see them out there. Regardless of where you go, you see the two in Fairhaven. You're in New Bedford across the water. They're right there.
Yeah.
You know exactly where they are. It's like a thumbnail, like a pin in the town of Fairhaven. And people they don't like to look at them. Those folks that lived I remember when those first came, and those folks that live in those neighborhoods were like, yeah, the humming is crazy. I can't take it. So I think, that was kind of the approach. Well, if we put them out there, they're kind of out of sight, they're out of mind, and, the fish and the whales and the dolphins aren't really going to complain. It's easier to put them there and deal with that, but when Mr. Smith is calling his state legislature every day or his town council or whoever it is that these things are humming or you put a face and a voice to it, people, start to see. So I think that was that's just me as a Shawn, it's normal person.
It's a fascinating conversation, and it's kind of one of those things that only time will tell. But
right. But, time will tell in everything that we do. All the factories that we had here that, maybe we're disposing of waste incorrectly all those years. All these things that we learn, I remember my grandfather had in his basement, he had a poster from, I don't even remember how long ago, but it was how to dispose of motor oil. And it was dig a hole in your yard and pour it in the hole. It was dig a hole, fill it with gravel, and then pour the motor oil.
That's crazy.
into that hole. That's how you used to dispose of motor oil. So everything is learn as we go.
Trial and error, yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if we should be the guinea pigs for that, especially, where it offshore. I think it's, that's the biggest thing is, oh yeah, well the wind gets generated. Well, once the wind reaches a certain mile per hour, they got to shut them down anyway. So when the wind is at its strongest, you're not powering anything. So I don't know. I can see the benefit in it. but does the benefit outweigh all the risks that might come with it? What do we do with those things after when they're decommissioned? You see that we're burying them. That we see that there's no real purpose for them afterwards. So the only thing is we'll kick it. We'll address it when we get there.
We get there, yeah.
And hopefully I get there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think there's too many variables, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm not really a big fan.
Yeah, and again, I'd be fascinated.
Pun intended.
Yeah. I'd be fascinated to have a pro-wind engineer or scientist come on the show along with a fisherman or just someone representing the anti-offshore wind community and have them have a civil conversation, sort of like the vice presidential election last night. That was kind of a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it was. I think you saw two people with two different views that were still able to be in a room together, have a civil discussion, agree and disagree.
That's the first time,
which is how it should be.
So I'm 28. That's the first time in my adult life that I saw two politicians on a debate stage actually have a civil debate. The last time there was one, I would say that was Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, 2012, about 12 years ago. So I was 16 years old. Since 2012, we haven't really had like a civil debate where we can just like look at two coherent people have a, friendly but still, different opposing views on topics. It was a breath of fresh air, honestly. Actually, when it was over, I was actually like pleasantly surprised and happy to have witnessed what I just witnessed, unlike the previous debates.
Well, some of them in years past, especially recent, go so far off the rails that it turns people off from politics. It's just a back and forth catfight almost, regardless who's on that stage. So I agree with you that last night's debate was just two folks that come from different upbringings and different points of view being able to be on stage and having that civil
They're
conversation.
actually agreeing with each other.
Right.
You
heard that a lot. You heard that a lot. Well, I agree with
That's crazy.
agree. You did hear that a lot. And that, I think, is the common ground that I spoke about earlier is you don't have to just be this way and you don't have to just be that way. Not saying that those ways are wrong, but don't dismiss the middle ground either.
Yeah. And I feel like so many of us are actually in that middle ground. Maybe you lean a little right.
Yeah.
Maybe you lean a little left. But I do feel like these politicians and the media kind of like to emphasize that very far left, very far right. And that's what separates us. And you have to pick a team, right? Where in real, like a perfect example, I had a conversation with Sheriff Paul Heroux, right? You might like him or hate him, I don't know. But he seemed like, he's a Democrat, but he seemed like a very middle of the road kind of guy. And I think that's probably the reason why he won this past election, because a lot of people started to look at Sheriff Hodgson as this really hard right-wing conservative voice. And then you have this new guy come in who kind of seems like he can speak to both sides.
Right.
And it's, as someone actually, you're a CEO, I mean, what's your take on the two different personalities of Sheriff Heroux and Sheriff Hodgson? Because two different people.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I think former Sheriff Hodgson, there's no debate that he's a law and order guy. What's right is right, and there's no gray area, and that's an approach to take. There's we're going to be kind and friendly, and that's another aspect to take. But I think whether you like Paul Heroux or not, he's easy to talk to. He'll listen to what you have to say. Not so much like I'm not saying that Sheriff Hodgson doesn't have that, but it's a little refreshing when you're able to have a conversation with somebody, or at least feel like you can. I think that what ends up happening is that common ground, or the willingness to find that common ground or work within that common ground is less obtainable when we have someone far left or far right, or so I to be honest with you, I think there's more of a swing now in government, whether it's local government, state government, looking for that middle ground person.
I know I am. I mean, I truly I consider myself an independent. There's things that I agree with the left on. There's things I agree with the right on. And I love when I can sit down and talk to someone and I don't really 100% know what their complete political views are.
Yeah.
Like if you could sit down and ask someone one question and then like based on their answer, you can just tell, all right, there's really no need to have a conversation. I know what your opinion is on basically every other topic because of how extreme you are on some of these topics. It kind of turns me off. And I think that's why, you know, when I really sat down and talked to the sheriff, we were doing a piece on the suicide issue that they were having in the Dartmouth campus, I guess is what you call Dartmouth
I think that's what he
location.
calls it. Yeah.
I don't know. I actually really enjoyed the conversation I had with him. I didn't expect him to be that middle ground of a person. And I kind of appreciated that. And I appreciate that when I sit down and talk to someone. Just, you know, we're so radical nowadays that it really is refreshing to sit down and just have a logical conversation with someone. You might disagree on things. You might agree on things. But we're both on the same page and we both want the same things, the same outcome.
Right. And like I know Sheriff Tom Hodgson personally. He's approachable to me. I think he's approachable to many.
Oh yeah, full disclaimer. I've never even met.
I'm just
Hodgson
saying
before. I'm not shitting on him.
he's approachable. I feel comfortable approaching him. The biggest thing is, you know, maybe somebody who's in that middle ground doesn't though. They don't want to, you know, they have this predetermined, like, I know this person won't even listen to me, which that's not true. People have to feel comfortable just being able to ask anybody anything. I think that's kind of like one of the biggest things too, is we as a people sometimes shut ourselves down. Like you said, this person's too far left or this person's too far right, that, you know, you said that one thing and I already know all your views. But still that willingness to be able to talk to those people and not completely shut yourself off from them. I think that would help not just keep people in those categories, because maybe that you heard that one thing and now you've predetermined, oh, I know everything about you based on that one thing, but you don't. That's still an assumption.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, so have that conversation with people, regardless whether they're left, they're right, middle of the road. I've always been a big fan of just we're all here on this ball together. You know, let's make our time here somewhat enjoyable, right?
I hear that. So, you know, you're a corrections officer, you're a city councilor in New Bedford. Yeah. One thing that Sheriff Haro is advocating for is closing down the Ash Street jail and moving all of those inmates into the Dartmouth campus. And I believe the reasoning is, he says it would cost less money to do that than to make the proper fixes that the Ash Street jail needs. Yeah. What's your view on that?
I haven't been in the Ash Street jail facility. There's no debate that I believe it's the oldest operating jail in, you know,
think America.
Yeah.
It's a crazy fact that no one really talks about. That's the oldest jail in America, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Definitely in the Commonwealth. I'll say that, but you're probably right.
Yeah.
But so there should be no debate that it's probably antiquated, right? It's probably it's probably not designed for today.
Just to say it is the oldest active in America. Just pull that up real quick.
Well, there you go.
That's pretty crazy factor.
1829?
1829.
Yeah.
I think Lizzie Borden stayed there.
Yeah, she did that. I think that was its most famous.
Yeah.
But
anyway, yeah. So what's your view on closing down the Ash Street jail?
So there's a mantra right now that crime is down, right? I don't subscribe to that. I think that the way that crime is being prosecuted
is down. Are you referring to New
down.
Bedford or the
just
country?
in general? And just in general, because we've the MCI to Junction, Walpole, that I worked for my first 11 years in, recently closed. They closed Bay State Correctional Facility right up the road from that a few years, probably 8 years ago now. So there's and I believe Concord is in the process of closing. So at one point we needed all these facilities because they were relatively full. Now we don't need these facilities. They're old, they're antiquated, and population is down. Well, don't think people are causing less crime. It has to be they're either getting away with it or they're not being prosecuted fully. And if they are being sentenced, the sentencing is lighter. The thing is we needed them at one time, and we don't need them now. We have more people in our population than we've ever had before. What's going to happen when we need them again? They're going to be closed. We're going to come to the taxpayers for billions of dollars to build new facilities. But closing down, let's say Ash Street specifically, because of population, we can consolidate. I don't want to spend money on the building, and I can operate them, the full operation in the one campus, I think is a good idea on its surface to consolidate and not fix. But if we need it, what's going to happen? There's no more parcels of land in the city of New Bedford that would be able to do that. What would happen if we need a Dartmouth expansion? Would they be able to expand? And is it the $3 million, I believe, that they're asking for, is it easier to do that and maintain it than closing down and building a new one? There was also talk from the same sheriff that said, well, I want to close it and bring the folks over, but then I want to use it as transition for individuals that upon or before release have nowhere to go,
like
no
almost
family
like a
to go, like a
transitional
transition house.
Got
you.
you.
So I think, I believe it's a state-owned property. So we would have a state-owned property in the middle of the city. And what will probably, if it were to close, is they'll do something similar to what they did with like the Armory. The state will button it up a little bit, and then they'll give it to the city. And now I have another huge building in the city of New Bedford that I can't do anything with. I already have enough of those. I don't want another one.
If we do close the Ash Street jail, what do you think a good use for that property would be? A museum, apartments?
I don't know if it's unsuitable for people to live in now. I don't see it being cost effective to turn it into apartments.
So you don't think an investor would want to come in and?
I'm not saying that there wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But it's a tough sell.
Yeah.
The easiest thing would be a museum of some sort, but is there enough draw to have it as a, it's not Alcatraz.
Yeah.
It's just an old jail in the, city of New Bedford. Can we get enough people to be like, Lizzie Borden was here for a little while.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have an immediate, obviously you want like, oh, well, housing is the answer. Everybody will jump right to housing. It's a huge, I don't think it would ever be turned into housing. I think, to be honest with you, it would either just continue to deteriorate to the point of probably demolition, and then maybe we can do something with the property. But I don't know. I don't think that closing it just yet is the answer, because I think it's easier to see if we still need it before we close it. Because once it's closed, it's closed. You're not grandfathered in with anything. You're not, and to come to the taxpayer and be like, well, I saved you money by closing this, but I'm going to, instead of the $3 million, I'm going to need $5 million or $10 million to do something else at this facility. I don't know. I don't have the answer.
Definitely a lot of questions. More questions than answers.
Oh, absolutely.
And speaking of questions, I wanted to talk about some of the questions that are going to be on the Massachusetts ballot.
Okay, yeah.
So we have 5. There's really just a couple I want to talk about. The first one is eliminating the MCAS graduation requirement. So essentially it's saying that it will remove the requirement for students to pass the 10th grade MCAS exam. What's your view on that? Do you think that's good or bad for our school system?
So I'm still on the fence on this one. I'm leaning more towards a yes. My household is divided on this. My wife is a no, and I'm more or less a yes. When I get in the ballot box, I have no idea. But so I was one of the first the guinea pigs of this MCAS, as we spoke earlier about on off camera. I was taught at that time nothing but the test. This is the only thing that mattered, and test prep and getting ready for this test. That was it. I'm not saying I didn't learn anything, but there was a lot more focus on this test that's coming. We need to focus on it, what it's going to look like, how you're going to pass it, and that was it. I like to think that our teachers are doing their jobs. We entrust them to teach our children, but we want, measures to make sure that they are teaching our children. So I think the other side of this is, well, if we eliminate this, well, how are we going to hold teachers accountable that they're teaching our children?
Which is a valid
properly?
question.
It absolutely is. But as I've stated to other people too, is I learn differently than other people. You probably learn differently than other people. Everybody learns differently. So any type of standardized, structured test, there are people that are good test takers, and there are people that are terrible test takers. And I know some terrible test takers that have gone on to do amazing things, whether it be with their hands, whether it be with their knowledge. They just learn things differently. So putting a square peg into a round hole, sometimes they can get the job done, but we know that that's not right. You don't put the square peg in the round hole.
Yeah.
So this is a toss-up for me. I'm more of a yes, because I know that in my own experience, it was, we're focusing on the test, take the test, learn the test, do good on the test so you can pass. So I don't know if that's a true, a real marker on the knowledge of the student. I think
it does say right here to kind of it gives pushback of what this could mean, right? So it says, but question 2 would also make Massachusetts one of the few states without a common graduation standard, allowing separate educational expectations in over 300 school districts across our state. So
everybody learns different.
Everyone learns different.
Everybody learns differently.
Yeah.
So if we're being taught, or we're in a culture that we celebrate what makes us unique, we celebrate what makes us different, we celebrate what makes us good, this is no different. Education and knowledge is no different, because what I know makes me unique to what you know, to what makes you unique to the next person. So
yeah, it feels like it should be a little less black and white, because it does note right here, it says student with cognitive disabilities and English language learners sometimes struggle with the MCAS and can benefit most from more flexible measures of graduation readiness. So it does feel like there should be more ways that we can test kids.
Right.
Because again, if you come into a country, if I just move to Mexico and everything's in Spanish,
I'm
going to fail things, even if I actually might
fail.
know the math or know the actual, the basic.
I'll tell you this. I come from a Portuguese upbringing, okay? And I can speak it. I can read it very little now. But so when I was in high school, I'm like, I'm going to take Portuguese. I know Portuguese. I got a C- in Portuguese. So just because you think you know it, or you didn't make me any less of a student. I just couldn't grasp that particular skill the way they wanted me to. Excuse me. But so being able to be like, hey, this is the way you do it, and this is the only way you do it, I think is a disservice to the kids and our teachers, to be honest with you.
So the next one is legalizing psychedelic drugs. This is kind of an interesting topic here.
This one it's different. And I know it's not for resale or anything like that. But I don't know. It's to me, it's the start of that, right? This is kind of like how, legalizing marijuana for recreational use and stuff like that. It's got to start somewhere, right? You can't just take one big giant bite of the apple. You got to eat it a little bit at a time. I'm not really a fan of this. I'm a no on it. Maybe I'll put up a sign that says I'm a no on question 4. Change my mind. But
I think it's an interesting topic, though. I mean, legalizing psychedelics. There's a lot of new studies, and I think they talk about that people with PTSD, a lot of anxiety disorders, are finding real therapy in psychedelic drugs, and I think it's an interesting one. I mean, I think it's one of those things that people kind of like weed, right? I mean, people were going to buy and smoke marijuana anyway. So it's better to tax it and make sure that they're not getting fentanyl in their marijuana.
Well, listen, I'll tell you this. If there's a way that the government can get their hands on then if they can regulate it somehow, take a little bit of money for themselves, and I think we saw that. We saw that locally where in the beginning, the tax from the dispensaries were going to come locally and be able to, and then the state was like, whoa, wait a minute, we need that money, because it did take off. It was a big producer of taxes. So I see the merit. I have seen. I don't think I'm not ready to allow it myself personally.
So yeah,
and that's not me, the counselor, talking. This is just me, the dad,
just the resident.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conversation to have. Here's another one. So question 5 is raising the minimum wage for tipped workers in Massachusetts. So right now, if you're a waitress, the base pay on average is $6.75, and then you get tips. This is an interesting one because, of course, and they're going to raise it to $15 an hour in Massachusetts. So of course,
gradually, I think too. There's a scale.
Yeah, they're not just going to bump it up.
Yeah.
Of course, on one hand, you want to make sure that people are making a good, not just a living wage, but like a nice living in what they do, right?
Absolutely.
If you're waiting tables all night, you want to be able to make a good living off of that. On the other hand, though, especially myself, I work with a lot of restaurants. We do some advertising and marketing and stuff with restaurants. I'm not seeing, as someone who's in restaurants all the time, I'm not seeing a bunch of uber wealthy people who are making money hand over fist and profiting off of the low wages of their workers. I'm seeing people just making their margins, and I'm seeing people go out of business.
Yeah.
So if you more than double how much they have to pay their employees, we're probably going to see a lot of restaurants go out of business because of that.
I fully agree with you on this. I think what this is here is, first off, I believe that it's a group out of California that's really pushing this initiative. And on the surface, if people don't do a little bit of research into their local eateries or restaurants that they like to go to, they just walk into the ballot box and think that they're writing some sort of pay inequity or they're righting a wrong, that it's the big restaurant owner putting the squeeze on the little waitress. They are gravely mistaken. I've spoken, especially now with this question, I've spoken with a few hundred wait staff. Anywhere we go out to eat or anywhere, I'll ask the bartenders, I'll ask the waitress, hey, how do you feel about the question? I have yet to find one person in the field that is that agrees with this question, that they say it's gonna have a restraint not only on the restaurant, as you say. You think that you're paying market rate for lobster now? Well, market rate for lobster plus paying that person $15 an hour. You're gonna see a direct reflection in your pricing for your food that you're having. To say that it's not that's wrong. It's a cost. These restaurants are getting by on such a small margin as it is, that they can keep the lights on. Yeah, they're putting money in their pocket. They'd be stupid not to. That's
what pay their mortgage.
That's what you go into business for. You don't go into business to run at net zero. But if you're increasing the money that I have, that it costs to operate my business, there has to be a direct reflection in that. And the only way that I can generate that is through my prices.
Yeah, and if you more than doubled how much you have to pay waitresses and waiters, you're probably gonna have them lose out on tips now because now the restaurant is probably gonna have to take some of those tips. Correct?
Well, you're going to have probably lose out on tips. The likeliness of somebody leaving a bigger tip
Yeah, exactly.
is small because they're like, hey, I'm already paying $100 and something for this meal. The likelihood of me tipping higher will gradually decrease. If I can't control, if I have to pay more and I don't want to increase my the product that I'm selling, I might have to lay a couple of people off. But those jobs that we're talking, these restaurants employ local people. Okay, most restaurants that I go to, they either live in the town or city that they're in, or they're pretty darn close. So they employ local people. These aren't outside companies coming in and hiring waitresses. They're local people. You're going to see a direct effect if this passes, in my opinion. But people, I think, are just thinking that they're righting a wrong that just really isn't there. These folks have unlimited potential on how much it's service-based. You provide good service, I'm going to provide a good tip. And that is limitless. Now you're going to put handcuffs on people that willingness to tip is going to be less. The other thing is, we live in a time now that people aren't going out to eat as much as they probably used to. They're holding the wallet, the purse strings a little bit more. So when that family of four goes out to eat and they're splurging on themselves, I don't think I think those people are they're gonna hold back even more. They're not gonna, hey, listen, the prices went up. We can't go out. We don't have enough to tip the waitress well enough. So it's just a whole bunch of variables that I don't know if these folks that put this measure forward thought about all of that stuff. And if they were just kind of, under the guise of we're righting a wrong, and I think if people don't do their research on it, this has the potential for some grave consequences to our local establishments here.
Yeah, I almost feel like kind of just reiterating what you were saying. Like if you more than double the minimum wage for waitresses and wait staff, you're incentivizing people not to tip because you're raising the price of an already expensive meal, right? Prices are going through the roof. And
I get paid $15 an hour now. What do I need to tip for?
Yeah, I'd be curious, like asking a lot of different waitresses, how much do you think you make an hour? Like, do you make more than $15 an hour?
Most of the ones that I've talked to
I would think yes. You do, especially a bartender.
Yeah.
And this is for bartenders as well.
I had one of my last conversations. I asked. I was at where were we? 99. We were at the 99, and my wife asked actually. She goes, "How do you feel about question 5 to the waitress?" And she's like, "I've been waitressing for 35 years, and if this passes, I'm going to start looking for a different job because I make way more money than what I will be getting paid under this new." If this question were to pass. And she says she makes, on good day, she'll make anywhere between $35 to $50 an hour. That's good money.
Yeah.
Now, granted, people are like, oh, well, the restaurant's making all the money. Yeah, well, the restaurant provides the atmosphere, the food, everything for that employee to basically run their own business within the business.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have, there are restaurants that I go to or establishments, if a certain person's not behind the bar or a certain person's not working, we'll go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, it could incentivize poor service as well. If you're no longer getting tips, because we're kind of assuming that's what would happen, right? Is that what you think would happen if we raise the minimum wage more than double in Massachusetts for bartenders and waitresses, then restaurants are going to start taking those tips and not giving it to their waitresses and bartenders.
Most likely, right? I mean, because they'll have to subsidize because they're taking all the risk, right? They, like I said, they own the physical brick and mortar. They have the insurance. They have to supply the food, all that stuff, and the wait staff provides the ambiance and provides the service. They're running their own business within that business. So if the overall operating cost increases and the restaurant doesn't want to inflate or raise their pricing, how are they going to make up those deficits? So that is a possibility that could happen. But I think the biggest thing here is realizing that, all I'll ask people to do is from now till November, when they go out, if they go out, ask a bartender, ask your server, ask your wait staff how they feel. Ask them. They're the ones going through this. They're the ones on the front line, if you will. Ask them. Don't just vote blindly thinking that you're righting some sort of wrong here.
Yeah, I could already see, like, if this does pass and waitresses and bartenders start to quit because they're making only $15 an hour and they're not getting tips, I could see 10 years from now, we're just having like robots do this, right? I mean, because then those companies will be like, all right, it'd be like, rather than pay $15 an hour, I'll just build some McDonald's type robot to take your order. If
service doesn't matter, then what is it? It doesn't matter if it's coming from a human or if it's coming from
an iPad or something, right? Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a shift in that a little bit, that service does matter, because you see places like, we'll use a big conglomerate like Walmart, right? Who was huge in the self-serve, right? Self-checkout. And you're seeing them dial it back, not only for loss prevention purposes, but for the most part, I'll avoid those self-checkouts because I like hey, how you doing today? And this the little like why are we taking the human aspect out of everything? And you go to a restaurant to splurge and treat yourself and have an interaction and this and that. If I wanted a robot to come to my door, that's what I would ask for, and that's not what let's go out, let's have a good time, and the wait staff is a huge part of that experience of going out. At least I think
100%, yeah.
You interact, you get, you hear stories. Oh, so I saw so and so, or I haven't seen you for a while, or you don't get that from a robot on wheels that comes up to you and just serves your food. So I urge people to really do their research on this one, on how it's going, because this has an absolute direct effect on our local economy and on local jobs.
Well, I could talk to you all day. One last question, though.
Sure.
So the Whaling City Golf Course, that's in your ward, right? Is that Ward 3?
It is. If I was a better golfer, I could stand on my roof and hit a golf ball to the golf course. So.
Nice. So I've heard a lot of rumors about the Whaling City Golf Course. It's going to turn into an industrial park. It's going to close down. They're going to make it 9 holes. Is there any update on what is the future of the golf course?
I can give you an update on that. That was kind of the advanced manufacturing campus that they talked about before I was on the council. And I believe there's going to be another set of RFPs that'll be going, requests for proposals for those who don't know, that'll be going out to see if there's any interest in developing that land. So at first, the idea was they were going to turn it into a 9-hole course, and folks were in an uproar about it, especially the golf community. Me included.
I'm a proud member of that golf community. The bad golfer community.
Yeah,
that's what I'm in.
We're all there. Yeah. If we weren't all there, we'd be on TV with those guys. But that's what keeps us going.
Exactly. And, one good shot.
Yeah. That's it. It eliminates the 120 that you took before that. That's what gets you coming back. But at first, there was discussion of turning it into a 9-hole course. 9-hole courses don't work. They don't generate money. Nobody wants to go to them. There's been no brand new 9-hole courses built in the last 20 years. And there's a reason for that. Like I said, they don't work. So turning that into a 9-hole course would be devastating for it. There was some outreach from the outcry from the golf community. There was some petitions going around showing that there was some support. They're able to keep it the idea is to keep it an 18-hole course and develop the land. I know you're familiar with that golf course, I'm sure, but from the parking lot back, holes 1, 2, 3, and the driving range.
Yep.
From my understanding, those are those would need to be eliminated to make room for what they're looking
So
to
they would
do
have
there.
to eliminate those first few holes and then make 3 different holes
driving
somewhere
range,
else.
and you would have to interlay 3 holes into the existing course. From what I'm being told, it is possible. So
That first hole is so fun, though. It's like,
I love that hole.
if you actually hit one straight, you
if
can
you
actually
gotta
hit it kind of far because it's a hill.
If you catch that speed slot, that hill, then you're good. I normally sit on that hill. I normally hit a ball right to it.
I sit right in the trees. That's right.
I normally sit on top, right on the precipice there. So I never really hit that speed slot, but it's a big one. I love the course. If anybody hasn't played it, it's when I was in high school, I started playing there, and it was like a desert. It was all dead, brown, like just a terrible place to play. They've done a lot of work on that course. The folks that are operating that, everything is nice and green. If they haven't been there in a while, I really urge people to go play there. But
it's affordable. I mean, like, I play golf in the area.
It's still one of the cheapest in the area.
Compared to Allendale and Dartmouth, it's usually at least like $30, $40 cheaper.
Oh,
than
absolutely.
That.
One thing that COVID did was really put a shot in the arm in the golf world. Right, a lot more golfers are out there now, but along with that, prices went around everywhere. They increased at the municipal golf course, but it's still most affordable courses, and it's one of the largest courses in the area as well. They don't make courses that long.
It's a difficult course.
Oh, it's a very tough course.
Some of those par fives, where you have to you have to kind of lay up and then hit that second hybrid shot.
You're talking about hole 7,
with
the big water in front of it.
Yep.
Yeah,
and then the other one on the back that's going kind of the same. It's another par 5.
Yeah, that one's hole 10.
It runs
that one's a
parallel
big
with 7.
one.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult course. I always say this. I say, the folks who complained about the course back when it was a desert were right to complain about it. Folks now complain about it because it just beats them up because it is a difficult course. But
so to get a final answer, though,
the idea is, yes, there should be a healthy balance between developing the land and still maintaining the 18-hole golf course.
And there's no idea of what they would develop the land into. There's still going to be proposals on that.
There still would be proposals. They're looking for advanced manufacturing, whether it be like computer chips or whether it's not like we have enough storage facilities. Don't get me started on that, but not like storage and that maybe like a storage type warehouse or things like that.
And these have to give us real jobs, not job hours, right?
That would definitely be. That's like a question now that I think every city councilor should ask everybody is, oh, you're looking to bring are these jobs or job hours? It's never a question that we've ever had to ask before, but I'll guarantee you people will be asking it now.
Well, man, I could talk to you all day. I appreciate it. Want you to come on.
I appreciate you coming in, asking me to come in. This is enjoyable. I hope that this really takes off for you guys. I'm a fan, so I hope everybody that's watching. If you know any marine biologists out there or fishermen that want to come on, I'd love to hear. I'd love to watch that.
That'd be fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just gotta be cordial.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.